Hey guys. All right, so we're continuing our strategy for solving quadratic equations, and what we're working for is like, well, how do you solve quadratic equations? So first of all, you can always solve them graphically, guys. And guys, for multiple choice numerical response questions, solve them graphically all the time. It takes a second to put it in your calculator, but it's pretty simple to get your solution every time. But sometimes you will have to do them algebraically, and so I'm going to suggest that you try to solve it by factoring first. Okay, so if you can solve it by factoring, great, do it that way. But if you can't factor it, well, we talked about completing the square in the last example, but now we're going to prove something we call the quadratic formula, which is going to be a formula that we can use to solve unfactorable quadratic equations. Well, really any quadratic equation you want, but typically for the ones that you can't factor. Okay. So the proof of this one over here, guys, you're never going to be tested on this proof. Okay, so it's you don't need to know it for any tests, but I feel that you guys should see where this formula is coming from, and even guys, if you're following along, okay, just like if at the end of this you believe, yes, this formula does work, I saw it proved like that, you know, it's great. Even if you can't do it on your own afterwards, that's okay. Like that, you don't need to, but just see where the proof of where this guy's actually coming from. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to, so quadratic formula is for, we're trying to solve any quadratic that's in this form here. So it's written in standard form over here, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And how do we get an answer from this? Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to solve this one. This is a very specific example, but then we're going to do the same steps to these guys over here. Okay, so for this one, the first step was I want to complete the square. Okay, so I'm going to factor 2 out of these two terms. So we'll get 2 x squared plus 6x still plus 5 equals 0. Okay, so all we did was factor out the leading coefficient out of the first two terms. Next, we need to complete the square. So it's going to be 2 x squared plus 6x. Now, how do we get this next number here? If you look at 6, which is our middle term, divided by 2, which is 3, 3 squared is 9. Okay. Now, we can't just add a 9 whenever we want. We have to make sure that we're still balancing to make an equivalent equation. So I added a 9, but it's really going to be 2 times 9, which is 18. So what I'm going to do over here, so normally I put an 18 here, but I'm just going to put 2 times 9 like this. Okay, so it's saying this 2 being multiplied times this 9, and now we're subtracting it so we have an equivalent equation. Okay. Now, how do we do that for this guy over here? Well, I want to factor out this a out of this first two terms over here. Now, the thing is, I don't know what a and what b is, so I don't know really how to factor this. So the way I'm going to do it is like this. Now this works because, like, well, how did this 12 become a 6? Well, I divided 12 by 2. Or so this is my b value, this is my a value. I took my b value, divided it by my a value, and that's how I got this value here. So I took b divided by a to get this guy here. Now let's do my completing the square step. And this word's going to get a little bit tricky over here, but like, what is half? So in this case, was half of 6 was 3, 3 squared was 9. What's half of b over a? Well, half of b over a is b over 2a, right? So if I just double the denominator, it's the same thing as having it. And now if I square that, I get b squared over 4a squared, okay? So what I have is b squared over 4a squared, like this, okay? Now, what do I need to subtract here? In this case, it was 2 times 9, so it's going to be a times this, minus a times b squared over 4a squared. This cancels out with this one over here, equals 0. Oops, still plus c, my mistake. Okay, so, all right, so what do we do next? It's going to be 2x plus 3 squared, negative 18 plus 5 is negative 13, equals 0. So we get a, that's this part here, and now I need to factor this. It's always half of the middle term. So it's going to be x plus b over 2a squared like this, okay? Now, in this case, it was 2 times 9 is 18, negative 18 plus 5 is negative 13. It's harder to do here because this is a fraction, this one's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top times 4a and the bottom times 4a as well. So that means I get negative b squared over 4a plus 4ac over 4a, like this. Okay, so now I'm going to combine these guys in a fraction. I'm going to put this guy first, though. I'm going to put the 4ac and then minus the b squared like this. So it's going to be ax plus b over 2a squared plus 4ac minus b squared over 4a. Okay, I'm going to copy those all over to the next slide here, guys. Bear with me for a sec. Okay, what will my next step be over here? Add 13, divide by 2. Divide by 2. Okay, now in this case it was a minus, so I added, but I'm going to subtract to bring this guy over here. It's going to be ax plus b over 2a squared equals negative 4ac minus b squared over 4a. Okay, now I'm going to deal with this negative here. I'm going to take this negative, I'm going to multiply it to this term and to this term to kind of make this a positive over here. So it's going to be ax plus b over 2a squared equals, I'm going to put this one first now, b squared minus 4ac over 4a. Okay, over here I divided by 2, so now I'm going to divide by a. I'm just going to do this, make that a squared like that. Okay, my next step here would be to square root both sides and make my plus or minus my square root principle. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus root 13 over 2. So I'm going to do square root. That means x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus, I'm going to the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Now the square root of 4a squared is just going to be 2a. Okay. Next step, minus 3. So I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus root 13 over 2. I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides, so I get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So now, just to simplify this a bit more, these are both denominators of 2a, so we get this very sweet looking quadratic formula over here. Okay, now those guys, this does not look super nice, but it actually is going to be very nice for us using this formula for us. So before we go on here, guys, just this proof was, I think it's just the, I expect everyone to find this proof difficult to follow. Okay, and that's okay, like that, right? So it's just the idea is like that, you know, because math's not easy, like that, you know, but I want you to be able to follow it, and hopefully that you saw that every rule that I was doing was just following normal math rules that you knew. You do not need to reproduce this proof and be able to do it, okay? I think it's helpful to know where the quadratic formula comes from, and it's just, guys, a belief I have about math is like I hated when someone just gave me a formula and said go and start using it, and they never showed me where that formula came from. Okay, it didn't feel right, and I mean math is a subject like that, you know, where everything is concretely proven, everything is broken down in step-by-step things like that, you know, and every statement is true, and that's how everything is kind of built foundationally. Okay, so we have proved this one for you. So what it's going to be is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root a b squared minus 4ac over 2a. This is our quadratic formula, okay? And in the next lesson, the next video, I'm going to show you how to use this one over here. And that's the important stuff, guys, okay? So I want you to trust that this formula works, because we showed you why it works over here. And now it's going to be, can you use it? Again, guys, you do not need to be able to do this proof on your own. Okay, I'm hoping that's that. I mean, and guys, that hopefully, and guys, when I say that everyone can follow, guys, probably not everybody, but I hope that some of you guys can follow it like that. You know, and that's great if you can. But if you can't follow it, don't worry about it. Okay. I will see you in the next video, guys, and we'll start practicing some of these ones.